All right, good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming today. I'm very excited. My name is Tony Penny. I'm the director of the Annenberg Presidential Learning Center here at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation. And we're very excited to have you join us today to hear Professor Gordon Lloyd talk a little bit about the Bill of Rights. In honor of Bill of Rights Day in 1981, President Ronald Reagan declared that on December 15th, 1791, our founding fathers rejoiced in the ratification of the first 10 amendments to the Constitution of the United States, a Bill of Rights which has helped guarantee all Americans the liberty which we so cherish. We have learned that the lesson our founding fathers taught is as true today as it was 2 centuries ago. Liberty depends not upon the state, but upon the people. Liberty thrives in the free association of citizens in free institutions, families, churches, universities, trade unions, and a free press. Mankind's best defense against tyranny and want is limited government, a government which empowers its people, not itself, and which respects the wit and bravery, the initiative, and the generosity of the people. For above all, human rights are rights of individuals, rights of conscience, rights of choice, rights of association, rights of emigration, rights of self-directed action, and the right to own property. The concept of a nation of free men and women linked together voluntarily is the genius of the system our founding fathers established. We will continue to strive to respect these rights fully in our own country and to promote their observance abroad. We could have no greater wish for mankind than that all people come to enjoy these rights. President Reagan, as you well know, had a tremendous reverence for our founding fathers and felt that it was the responsibility of each generation of Americans to share the great history of our country with each succeeding generation. Today, as a result of a wonderful partnership with the Ashbrook Center at Ashland University, a center whose mission is to restore and strengthen the capacities of the American people for constitutional self-government, we are proud to host a series of lectures on the Bill of Rights with Professor Gordon Lloyd, arguably America's finest scholar when it comes to the American founding. If you visited his website, teachingamericanhistory.org, you're familiar with his work. And if you Google Constitutional Convention, you'll find that of the more than 6 million websites that show up under that search query, his is listed first, right before Wikipedia. So for those of you who are teachers, you know that's a pretty remarkable accomplishment. And for the ratification of the Constitution, there are more than 7 million sites, and his shows up second, right after the National Archives. As you can see, there is quite a great deal of respect and desire and interest in the work that he has done. And in this day and age, if you can't trust Google, who can you trust, right? His most recent addition to the website is the topic of today's conversation, which is the Bill of Rights. Professor Gordon Lloyd earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in Economics and Political Science at McGill University and received his master's and PhD degrees in government at Claremont Graduate School. He's the co-author of 3 books on the American founding and the sole author of a book on the political economy of the New Deal. He also has numerous articles, reviews, and opinion editorials to his credit, and he's the creator, with the help of the Ashbrook Center, of 3 highly regarded websites on the origin of the Constitution. He's received many teaching, scholarly, and leadership awards, including admission to Phi Beta Kappa and the Howard White Award for Teaching Excellence at Pepperdine University. And his areas of research span the California Constitution, common law, the New Deal, slavery, and the Supreme Court, and the relationship between politics and economics. And my personal favorite credential of his is that he serves on the National Advisory Council for the civic education work that we do at the Annenberg Presidential Learning Center. So please join me in welcoming Professor Gordon Lloyd.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. And what we're going to do today, in 3 sessions this morning and 3 sessions this afternoon, is the third in the trilogy, the convention, the ratification, and now the Bill of Rights. Hopefully that pretty much tells the story, because I don't know that I have a lot in me to continue other parts of the story. But the audience is huge with regard to the Bill of Rights. If you're talking to 6 to 7 million on the convention and ratification, you're talking 1 billion when it comes to the Bill of Rights. The interest in the Bill of Rights increases exponentially, and so it's about time that that the Bill of Rights be covered and be included within the overall treatment of the founding. This is the recent addition that Tony was mentioning, the Bill of Rights website. And I will spend time with you, if that's what you'd like to do, surfing this website, trawling it, showing you how to use it, if that's something that you'd like to do a little later on. But for the moment, I'd like to get started with the colonial and English tradition. And the reason I want to do that is because America is a rather strange country in a number of ways. But one most important way is that it's one of the rare countries that is interested in its colonial past. You look at all the countries that have come into existence over the last 100, 200 years, they shed the colonial past. It's something to flee from. There's nothing good there. It's only the revolution which is good, or the liberators which are good. So that there's something, however, when it comes to the story of the Bill of Rights, which we will do in 6 sessions, there's something about the story that encourages us to look to the colonial and English past. So that's what we're going to do in this first session. We have to begin somewhere. I mean, that's part of the whole problem. Any book you write, any website you put together, you got to begin somewhere, and time is usually against you, so you have to end somewhere. Hopefully you begin in a coherent fashion and you end in a coherent fashion. So we're going to begin not with the Greeks, not with the Romans, not that they weren't interested in certain rights, but the story, the narrative of the U.S. Bill of Rights. I think it's fair to say we can start with Magna Carta. And what this diagram shows in the columns are a number of selected English documents, 3 in number: Magna Carta from 1215, the English Petition of Rights from the 1640s, and the English Bill of Rights from 1688. And then selected colonial documents. I haven't included the Mayflower Compact, but I do have Massachusetts Body of Liberties and other, Pennsylvania, the pen, the framing, etc. So there is a selection. I'm not pretending that this is exhaustive, but this is what I would call an essential selection of English and colonial documents. And then with the rows, the content of the Bill of Rights. So you can have the U.S. Bill of Rights as we know it, as it's 1791 ratified, 1789 passed through Congress. Although there are, as we know it, 10 amendments to the Constitution, there are 26 rights that are listed in the U.S. Bill of Rights. And so what this table tries to do is to, no, not try, it does. It takes the 26 rights that are in the U.S. Bill of Rights, and it tries to match it up with the selected English and colonial documents. Now, this, I'm not meaning to imply causation. I am simply trying to encourage conversation that why start with the Magna Carta? Why go through the English and colonial heritage? Why do that? The answer is because there's something there, and that it would be remiss of us as students of the Bill of Rights and the heritage of liberty to simply overlook that, because the framers didn't simply overlook it. If we were to go to the bottom of this table for a moment, we will see that just numerically, before we get into the detail, just numerically, 9 of the 26 rights in the U.S. Bill of Rights are, one could trace them to Magna Carta. And that raises a question. I mean, is that a good number? Is 1/3, does that sound about right? Sometimes Magna Carta, I think, gets a little bit of an overplay. It gets a bit of an overplay. You can see it, if you go across the United States, you will see very often, you will see the U.S. Bill of Rights, and then next to it Magna Carta, as if there is, just a hop, skip, and a jump from Magna Carta to the U.S. Bill of Rights. So is 1/3 enough? Is it the right 1/3? What 2/3 are not there? So conversation. We just start there. We don't end there, but we start there. And if you keep looking at go the way go through, you will see that the Massachusetts body of liberties, which is there, you'll see 16. And I think that comes as a surprise to a considerable number of people, that there's homegrown, right from Massachusetts, 16 there from the 17th century all the way through. So there's something going on that, yes, is partly English, partly colonial, but there's another number 10 or so that cannot be accounted for by the English and colonial tradition. But that comes later. What about this English then and colonial tradition? What can we learn just from looking at this diagram, thinking about what's there? One of the features that you might want to use, and we will only pay very, very small attention to it, is if with Lisa's help, you can go here, and this with this. This is what I call the WOW map, or the module. You will see that on the left-hand side, part 1 is origins of the Bill of Rights. Part 2 is the politics of the Bill of Rights. Part 1, if you go in there and you are interested in the English and colonial documents, what you do is you eliminate the other two, and you're left with the English and colonial documents. And so if you want to figure out where would I find the right to bear arms, so you click on, you search for the right to keep and bear arms, and it tells you which documents you can find it. You can see this in three documents. Or if you want to figure out no cruel and unusual punishments, 2 lines down, you click that, and you can see those are the places you would go to find the documents. Or you can flip it. You want to figure out, for example, what does the Magna Carta contain? And it will tell you what the Magna Carta contains. So that you can use this WOW document both ways. You know the concept, you can find the document. You know the document, you can find the concept. That's something I'd like you to introduce you to, and we could play with that later on if you want, because all the documents and all the concepts are within this WOW chart. But let's return to where we were before with the English and colonial documents. One feature that again, we won't spend a lot of time with this particular, but if you go to the column, say Magna Carta at the top, and we could click Magna Carta, that what happens is the Magna Carta comes up. So that you can then search with your search engine, you can search through that, and it will tell you where you want, if you want to find out, where would I find in the Magna Carta, such and such and such and such. So this is hopefully a full search engine that you can use for exploring the English and colonial origins of the Bill of Rights. That's point 1. Point 2, let's go back to this. There is something, of course, there's something English about the English Bill of Rights. And what's English about the English Bill of Rights? Or the contribution to is really, if we take a look at three rights or liberties to explore, just to start with. One would be economic, property rights. The right to the fruit of your labor in the form of property. Now, if we were to take a look at property rights, we would find that we are involved with all kinds of strange English words that have to do with feudalism. And feudalism means the doctrine of land and property in land, And feudalism has the doctrine of primogeniture. And primogeniture means that the landed property shall be handed down in whole to the eldest son. Now there's your property rights. There is no what we might call economic liberty, that is not because you work the land or you bestow labor on something that you are in, that you earn the right to the property. It's not an inherent right, it's an inherited right. So that would be the property understanding. Now, that's not going to take you very far in a U.S. Bill of Rights when it comes to the understanding of the right to earn your daily bread. But it will tell you that there's going to be certain protections for property, which, if, quote, democratized, unquote, can make its way into the American regime. But in order to do that, you're going to have to drop primogeniture. As we shall see in our next session together, that is exactly what happens when we move away from the English and colonial past into the American, I mean, we have full-fledged American independent understanding. That's got to go. Primogeniture is out, and a new understanding of property rights will be introduced. The second thing that makes this very English is monarchy. We're talking about Magna Carta against King John. We're talking about the English petition against King Charles in the Civil War. And we're talking about the English Bill of Rights against King James. So there's something about monarchy that is going on here with regard to political liberty. Political liberty is ultimately, as the American contribution, is the right to choose the form of government under which you shall live. The furthest the British go with regard to that is the right to choose the monarch under which you shall live, which I think is rather different than choosing the form of government under which you shall live. So that the three documents that I've referred to as the English heritage suggest that the culprit in the system, the unreasonable individual or unit, is the monarch, absolute monarchy. So that the attempt to restrain the monarch with what is actually called a Bill of Rights in 1688, 1689, the attempt is not to do away with monarchy, but to do away with absolute monarchy. To try, in other words, to come up with a limited monarchy or a reasonable monarchy. But who enforces this? The monarch. Right? Or if the nobles are lucky, then the nobles will have some representation. And if the parliament is lucky, then the parliament will have some representation. So that rights, what we're beginning to see in terms of politics, rights are an attempt to achieve reasonable conduct by those in power to be enforced by a system of representation. And part of the reasonableness and representation is that there shall be no taxation without representation. Now, we're not talking essentially about courts enforcing rights here. We're talking about representation. That only makes sense if you have an absolute monarch. You want representation. It's only after you have representation, and you may find it inadequate, that you're going to turn to some other source to try to secure rights. Right? And that's two, right? That's political, and that's economic. And thirdly, there's something English going on in the third. It is religious. There is certainly in the first one, the Magna Carta, there is no indication of religious liberty that's going on there. Once you get to the Civil War, the Civil War in Britain is also a religious war. It's a question of the Cavaliers and the Roundheads and the dissenters that run all the way through Wales And those Welshmen who didn't stay to get their head chopped off went to Pennsylvania. And there's a strong Welsh presence. Swarthmore, Haverford, you can continue all around Philadelphia. And so there's a lot of the Pilgrims Plus come out of that tradition. So you either stay and fight or you flee. And I think that's important. And when you look at the 1688, 1689 discussion about rights, what you have there is the concern. Let's put it this way: there's a concern that King James is a Catholic, and there's a concern that King James will follow in the Catholic heritage of Bloody Mary, and so that linked to the problem of monarchy is not just this absolutism, but what is the religion going to be of this monarch? So it's not just who becomes the next king or queen, but what the religion of that next king or queen is be. So that, let me point out to you something that might strike you as a little odd, but I hope, given my brief discussion here, will no longer strike you as odd. If you take a look at the right to bear arms, one of the earliest statements of the right to keep and bear arms is in the English Bill of Rights. And if you see it, it is number 7. And it says that the subjects which are Protestants may have arms for their defense suitable to their conditions and as allowed by law. That is, the Protestants have a right to bear arms. Why? All the better to protect ourselves, my dear, against a Catholic king. I see by your overwhelming response that it is not a surprise to you that this is either that or you're just shocked. But once it comes across the pond here, we no longer have to talk about Protestants having the right to bear arms. We might have to shift it to Catholics having a right to bear arms to protect themselves. But it's clearly the right to keep and bear arms in its origin, its British origin, is clearly linked to the protection of a certain group of people who are unable otherwise to ensure their protection. All right, so that's point 2. Going through these 3 rights that I wanted to talk about. Well, what do we see in the colonial heritage? We're beginning to see something American, it seems to me, budding. And by seeing something American budding, I mean you're beginning to see a movement, not a full-fledged movement because it's still a colony, but you're beginning to see a movement away from the primogeniture in terms of property rights. You're beginning to see a distance in terms of political. Because the king or the queen is across the pond and leave you alone. So you get a strong development of local self-government beginning to take place. And then thirdly, you're beginning to see Massachusetts body of liberties where you have some religious liberty beginning to make its way in, certainly within each colony, not necessarily across all colonies, but you're beginning to see that and you begin to see the phrase, the free fruition of such liberties, immunities, and privileges, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that this colonial heritage is laying the groundwork for what will flower later on. And that it makes a lot of sense then for Americans to study this colonial past because it has roots. Tocqueville talked about how democracy in America really began with the Mayflower Compact. This was compact theory before John Locke. It's 60, 70 years before John Locke, 20 years before Thomas Hobbes, 20 years before the Civil War in Britain. 60 years before the English Bill of Rights, so that there was this kind of homegrown contract theory, compact theory, even covenanting theory. And you say, well, how is this covenant? We hereby get together and we lay down this law, etc. Contract. Who's to enforce this? And the idea is each other. We as a community enforce it, probably by shaming, and also it is enforced by oath. That is, as God is my witness. So what you will see in colonial times is a lot of oathing going on. And you see, there's a peculiarity. By the way, the governor had to take a special oath, and that sort of spills over into the U.S. Constitution, where the president takes a special oath, over and above the oath that the lawmakers take. In the colonial documents, the lawmakers take an oath, but the governor takes a special oath. And it varied from one state to another state, colony, from one colony to another colony. But I think the presence of the oath was an extremely important part of enforcement. Again, not the judiciary so much in this early stage, but self-enforcing through the community, as God is my witness, and the development of a system of representation, so that you have in the colonies a pretty widespread right to run for office, right to participate in politics. We're not talking about the full-fledged voting. We're not talking that, but what we're talking about is laying down the roots. And what I like to remind people is that framers are not closers. They don't lay down carpet. Framers lay the frame, and that it's only when you have the strong frame that can withstand the winds and the tornadoes, that earthquakes, that you say, yes, it has been well framed. And that it becomes later on, you can change carpet and do other things. And when you're talking about the roots of the order, you're not talking about the flowering, you're talking about the roots. So that I have no problem defending the laying down of the roots and the framing, because I don't expect my framers to complete or my rooters to flower. But depending on how you do frame and root, then it seems to me that you have a very good chance of potential survival, which leads me to end on a very happy note before I just open it up for you to raise some questions. And the happy note is that no regime in the history of the world has lasted forever. There's a certain parallel with the human body, the political body. We come into existence and we go out of existence. Why? It's the nature of life. And the idea of medicine is somehow to, when you get older, to alleviate the pain. When you're younger, you have aspirations, hopefully, and that you eat well, and you take care of yourself, and that hopefully there will be an improvement in the medicine over the years that gives you a longevity and a decent life. Well, I think the analogy is in the political body. Hopefully, if you have a good birth, and you have a good crib life, and you're brought up properly in the beginning, and you take care of yourself and you nurture yourself, that you will likely to last for a considerable period of time. To expect something to last forever is ridiculous, but to live a decent life is reasonable. And so looking at the colonial, English and colonial roots, I'm saying that there is a very reasonable foundation from which later folks can draw. and without simply mimicking, or, by the way, excuse me, hating. The easiest thing to compare this as we move towards the revolutionary period is with the French Revolution. And I mean, the French Revolution changed the names of towns, just like the Russians changed the name of town. You go back east, you can still see Yorktown. You can see, there's still Haverford, Swarthmore, whatnot. We don't change the names. You say, oh, but what is in a name? Well, Leningrad, Proletariat Avenue. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can do. And then what do you do after? You change the name back, St. Petersburg. Well, whatever happened to St. Petersburg? Oh, well, it was changed. Well, all right. Well, for the better? Well, of course, comrade. And then the French also even changed the calendar. Not that there's nonsense, Christian Catholic nonsense about 30 days has September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31 except February that has 28, except in a leap year when it has 29. I mean, what kind of calendar is that? I mean, it's not natural. So the French created 12 months of 30 days. So what do you do with the extra 5 days? You have a festival. Right? But you don't name these months October. How can you name it October? Octo is 8, but October isn't the 8th month. December, that means 10. But December is not the 10th month. I mean, this makes no sense at all. So we name it snow, wind, fire. Right? The French know how to have a revolution. Right? And they completely wiped out the Ancien regime. They wiped out property rights, they wiped out political rights, and they wiped out religious rights. On the ground that those rights were only eligible for the few who were privileged. And that what we're going to do is start all over again, right from the beginning, as if one possibly can do that. That's rare. And we know what happened to the French. The reign of terror, Napoleon, restoration of monarchy, Second Republic, restoration of Napoleon, Third Republic, Hitler, Fourth Republic. Then the French let it collapse, Fifth Republic. Hopefully, this is what I'm going to suggest, hopefully America is still basically in the First Republic. And that we will see the movement from the English and colonial heritage to the Republic, which becomes rather stable in the next session. But we've got 10 minutes. Is that correct? For Tony, the floor is yours. Ask me anything regard to this. This map, there's the other maps, there's the wow. If you want to do that, please feel free. Yes, sir. Well, if you just wait a moment, well, we can get Tony here with a microphone. Thank you.
So if America is interested in exporting democracy
Yes.
to Afghanistan, Iraq, Arab Spring,
Yes.
what are the chances if they don't have this background?
Well, that's a very good question. We'd have to heavily subsidize it. No, that's a very good question. To what extent is a culture needed in order to plant the roots? That a constitutional heritage is more than simply words on paper. You need to make it work. I think that's a very good question. And I am pessimistic with regard to the ease with which something like Afghanistan can move into to full-fledged democracy. They've got clans, they've got all kinds of things, right? I mean, the battles between the Sunnis and the Shiites in the Muslim is probably worse, in my opinion, worse than Catholics versus Protestants. In many ways, it's more violent. So yes, it would be. It's a difficult task. Now you'll say, well, you know, one of the arguments about this, some variation of the Bush doctrine, is, well, didn't it work in Japan? Didn't it work in Germany? Well, think about it. Japan and Germany were almost leveled. So maybe it takes, God forbid, leveling in order to sort of say a clean slate. I mean, what culture? Yes. So let me just leave it at that. That yes, I think it's very, very difficult indeed. And in fact, I would suggest that when you take a look at the 88 days that it took to create the United States Constitution, and you got 55 delegates, etc. Basic, with the exception of 2 Catholics, you got Protestants, you've got a considerable. They knew each other. I mean, if you take a look at they knew each other from colonial times. They knew each other from serving in the Revolutionary Army. They served together in the Continental Congress. I think like 7 or 9 of them signed the Declaration of Independence. Princeton University had an incredible number of framers who went there. Not just folks from New Jersey. It was, Madison went to Princeton. So that, and you all know when you go out of town, go out of state to university, you acquire a certain continental experience. So that, and the convention nearly broke down. So given all of those things in common language, basically common religion, common education, etc., they still quarreled immensely with each other. Faction, said Madison, is sown in the nature of man. And if you don't argue about big things, you'll argue about little things.
Can you trace French sources of the Bill of Rights out of this as well, since there was so much French and English, or the French were involved in the American Revolution and all that stuff? So can you trace any of the things to French sources?
You mean trace French sources back to America?
Right, and into the thoughts of...
Oh, yeah. Yes, that is possible. I have not laid it out like this, but the answer is yes. The one important source would be Price. He's a preacher in Britain, and 1780s into 1790s. And what he said was that what we are seeing is the three rights revolutions coming together: the British, 1689, the American, 1776, 1787, and the French, 1789. So he is one of the movers and shakers of that thesis. Edmund Burke is one of the movers and shakers of the opposite thesis, in which he tries to argue that the American Revolution is a lot closer to the British of 1689, or the glorious bloodless revolution, whereas the French is blood. I mean, blood has a lot to do with how Burke looks at things. So that one of the things that Jefferson could not understand about Burke was why he was in favor of the American Revolution but was against the French Revolution. And Jefferson, like Price, thought that the three went together, and each was sort of an advance on the other, that the American was an advance on the British, and the French, in fact, was an advance on the American. And Burke, he reeled in, and that's sort of the birth of modern conservatism, with the fear of the French Revolution. But yes, you can take the French Declaration of Rights of 1789, and you can see an incredible similarity between that document and like the Virginia, which we'll take a look at next session, the Virginia Declaration of Rights. By the way, part of our problem in dealing with the Bill of Rights is that there's also an alternative nomenclature, that is Declaration of Rights. And what is the difference between a Declaration of Rights and a Bill of Rights? And it's very difficult to nail that down. Usually a Declaration of Rights, I think you can say with some degree of confidence, comes at the beginning. Like a Declaration of Independence, a Declaration of Rights. It's like a mission statement, who we are, this is what we stand for. A Bill of Rights, usually, but there are exceptions because people don't use language with exact precision. A Bill of Rights tends to be inside of a document where you're listing certain rights, having just listed a Bill of Powers. You then list a Bill of Rights which are designed to restrain the very powers which you have just listed. But so the French boldly declare these are our rights. And so there is a copying, yes, there is a copying with a French twist. And egalite is the French twist. And also, I think there's much more of a communitarian character. And then this unfolds. I mean, when the French started, they have this Declaration of Rights. And so the question is, what form of government do they choose to secure these rights? And the answer is they don't do away with monarchy right away. They try to constitutionalize the monarchy, and then they do away with the monarchy by chopping the heads off. And then they go into a republic and have three constitutions right away. The French are not very good at fussing about forms. Off with your head. Whereas Americans, I think, learned to fuss about forms from the English. The French didn't bother with checks and balances and separation of powers. That's why you had the Reign of Terror and the Directorate. Why do you need checks and balances? The only reason why you needed checks and balances, say the French, is if you're going to check the lords against the commoners, and you're going to check the clergy against the ordinary folks. So the check and balance and separation of powers is part of a class system for the French. But if you do away with the class system, why do you need checks and balances? And the answer is, come to America. The idea was not to check, and it was not to have different classes per se being represented, but you're going to have the people represented in different ways. Like today, California, I mean, you've got 40 senators, 80 assembly. There's just the districts are larger and the Senate is supposed to do a different, perform a different function than the assembly. But the French did away with that, so they don't fuss about forms. And that's something which is peculiarly French.
My understanding, if you go with the idea of no regime in history has lasted forever and the analogy of a human lifespan, where would you say the American Republic is in that human lifespan?
Your question is, how healthy is America?
Are we going to Ross
We
on
need an
Tuesdays for a
MRI.
senior discount?
I think we have lost touch that regimes don't last forever. I think that we're on a utopian roll, and that the idea that somehow fussing about forms, being concerned about not being in debt, being concerned about that you need civic education, your job, those kinds of things, do we really need it? And I hope that we realize that yes, we do need that. Yes, we do. Yes, we do need that. If you go back to the etymological root Greek of the meaning of democracy. It means crassy rule by the demos, which is the many who are poor and stupid. Now, Greeks didn't have a problem with sort of saying whether they're challenged. No, that is stupid, and so the only way you can make democracy somehow successful and work and last decently and for a long time. I mean, you want to live a decent life, and for a long and decent life. That means that the majority ought not to be poor, and the majority ought not to be stupid. And I think, on the whole, we have created a middle-class democracy, although it seems to be dwindling, and that we have had a mixed success with the question of an educated electorate, and by not being, I don't mean a PhD, because you can have many stupid PhDs, right? When it comes to civic education. It means understanding the roots of the American order. It understands what kinds of things lead a country into trouble. Where does human nature fit into this, etc. So that instead of being bored about it or leaving it to professionals, we have civic education. And so I think that's your job, not mine. No, I mean not. No. It's very much your job, and you're in the front lines. And you've got an extremely important part to play. If you go back and you take a look at the English and colonial times, they were an educated bunch of people. And you say, well, not really, were they? Yes. And when you get to the Federalist Papers, which we won't be today, you'll be glad to hear. But another day, another time, you get to the Federalist Papers. One of the things that I teach graduate students at the School of Public Policy at Pepperdine, and I'm talking about 25, 26-year-olds. And they're bright, they're lovely, I love them. But they have not read the Federalist Papers, and they have not been taught how to read the Federalist Papers. Just one of the documents that help you to understand civic education. And they want to, you read the first line out of the Federalist No. 1, I think that the efficacy of this, I'm like, oh, could you please give me Cliff Notes or a translation of this? And the first thing that comes to their mind is, gosh, that must have been written for upper-class twits back then in 1787. I mean, who can possibly understand that except the elite? Well, I hate to tell you, but you haven't been taught how to read. And you're getting your news on the fly, et cetera, et cetera. So where would I rank us? I would rank us at the crossroads. Why not? Yeah.
Let's take a pause here. We'll stop this first session and give everybody about 10 minutes or so. We'll come back at 10:10. So if you need to get another beverage or use the restroom, we'll start the second one. So thank you very much for the first session, Dr. Lloyd.